Well, welcome, brothers and sisters, and we are very happy today to have with us Matt Staver, pro-life attorney with Liberty Counsel and Liberty Counsel Action, to talk to us about these destructive abortion amendments that have been introduced in 10 states, and particularly where both Matt and I reside in Florida, we're facing Amendment 4. Matt, welcome to the program, and I want our viewers, first of all, who don't already know you, to know a little bit more about your background. I know that you're also a pastor and you have extensive biblical training. You have been a professor, and tell us a little bit more about the things you've done. You've argued before the Supreme Court, and just have you and I have interacted for many years on the pro-life battlefront, and we're very grateful for your work.
Well, thank you. And I have always admired and appreciated your work. You have been one of the strongest pro-life voices in the nation with really very few peers at all. And I just want to thank you for your courage and your clarity on this very critical issue. I mean, this is a fundamental issue. There is no greater right than the right to life. Without the right to life, all other rights are simply worthless. The right to property, the right to religious freedom means nothing to a corpse. So it is really the fundamental right of all rights. Liberty Counsel, Anita and I founded it in 1989. This is our 35th year anniversary this year in 2024. And we started Liberty Counsel because while I was a pastor, I saw a documentary called Assignment Life. It was one of the early documentaries, came out in 1983.
I remember
and that was my first introduction to abortion. And I was shocked. You know, I was a pastor. As you mentioned, I have theological training, knew a lot about the scriptures, but I was shocked that I didn't know about what was happening in my own community, my own nation, the genocide against the unborn. And that experience drove me into study. And the intersection between my Christian faith and the laws and policy around me as they relate in this particular case to life and so many other issues. And that was the beginning of Liberty Counsel. We founded Liberty Counsel in 1989 to advance religious freedom, the sanctity of human life. And then later in the early 1990s, we added the third program or third prong, and that is defending God's design for marriage and family, for how he created us in his image.
Matt, I have been doing various broadcasts and talks with the leaders from all 10 states who this year in 2024 have these abortion ballot measures. And as you know, we're talking about Arizona, Colorado, our own state of Florida, and then Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. And looking at all these amendments, I want to share with you one of the things that I've been saying and get your own legal expert reaction to it. You know, the reversal of Roe v. Wade was a legal earthquake, and I don't think either side has fully adjusted to the Dobbs decision just yet. And what it did, of course, it took away the cover that the abortion proponents always had, just to run behind the robes of the justices, if you will, and essentially not have to make an argument justifying abortion. All they had to say was, oh, it's a constitutional right. And then the court said, no, American people, you battle it out. Look at the evidence, have the arguments, use the political and legislative process, and come to a hammered out, well-considered policy on abortion. And I don't think the other side liked that very much, because when you really analyze what abortion is, their arguments fall apart. So the effort now to make it once again a constitutional right, this time at the state level, it seems to me is an indication, first of all, of their fear of a really robust political and legislative debate, a real honest and comprehensive debate. And instead, essentially, they want to shut down argument, because tell us more about this. Once if these amendments were to get into a state constitution, that's not just a law, that's a boundary to any further laws, court decisions, or executive actions in that state.
Yeah, right. In fact, we're working in all of the states that you mentioned, but let me begin with Florida, because it really sets the stage and is basically indicative of this agenda that you're talking about. In Florida, for example, we had a mirrored decision in 2024. A 15-week law went up to the Florida Supreme Court. Back in 1989, the Florida Supreme Court went the wrong way, just like Roe versus Wade at the U.S. Supreme Court in 1973 went the wrong way. And the Florida Supreme Court back then, 35 years ago, said that there was a so-called right to an abortion in the Florida Constitution, making Florida even more liberal than Roe versus Wade. And so when Roe was overturned in 2022, Florida continued to have abortions, and it became an abortion destination state. But on April 1, 2024, the Florida Supreme Court, kind of in the same mirrored scenario as the U.S. Supreme Court, upheld the 15-week Florida law, and in doing so said that there's no right to abortion in the Florida Constitution. That allowed the 15-week law to go into effect, and that opened the door for the 6-week heartbeat law to go into effect 1 month later on May the 1st, 2024. That also opened up $30 million of annual funding from the state. That's a recurring annual fund that provides for formula, diapers, cribs, education, retraining, job placement, and so many other things for women who are pregnant, in addition to the 167 crisis pregnancy centers in Florida. So immediately, Florida moved from this forced abortion through the court system to a free state, one of the most pro-life states in the nation, not only with a 6-week heartbeat law, but the annual appropriations of $30 million a year to help women during and right after pregnancy. But all that changes in November if Amendment 4 passes. So what did they do with Amendment 4? You have the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, and the Open Society, the George Soros Open Society, getting deceptive information to the people to get their signatures, and their signatures that they obtained, they spent $15 million to get signatures gathered to put this on the ballot. The people who were solicited for their signatures to get this on the ballot, they were not told that it allows abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. They were told that it's about women's health or women's safety or rights, nothing about abortion. So they got the signatures, it got on the ballot, and that's what's coming up. Now what they're focusing on is targeting the 6-week law. Well, we have to pass the abortion amendment to overturn the 6-week law. But if you pass this amendment, it's in the Constitution, and it's not coming out. And what does this amendment do? They don't want the voters to know what this amendment does. This amendment says, among other things, no law shall restrict. No law shall restrict abortion. Well, as you know, every law is a restriction of something. A health and safety law that says you need to have your doors at a certain width, or you have to have a fire exit, or you need a fire extinguisher, or you need an oxygen container there, or you need a defibrillator. That's a law that says you have to have those safety measures in order to do something. It's a law that restricts. You can't just open your practice. You can't just open an abortion clinic without these safety measures. Every law restricts. When it says no law shall restrict, that means no law. So the only thing that would survive if this passes is parental notification, which is nothing. A text message, a letter sent to a wrong address sometime before the abortion, but with no ability of the parents to object or have any input. That's it. The only reason why that would survive is because that's a separate constitutional amendment. Every other amendment, every other law would go. So that means no doctor requirements, no health and safety standards could be put on abortion, no parental consent, no informed consent, no reflection or waiting period. And in fact, this would also mean abortion up to and including birth and state funding of abortion. Now, if you put that to the taxpayers, to the voters, do you want to fund abortion with your tax dollars all the way up to the point of and even during birth? Because that's what will happen if you vote yes. They will unequivocally, overwhelmingly say no. So they will deceive the voters into thinking that it is something other than what it really is. It's radical, it's extreme, and what we just talked about in Florida is happening in the other 9 states as well.
Matt, together with the actual language of the amendment, which of course you already mentioned some of the words that are in there, and let me read this: except as provided in Article 10, Section 22, which is, like you just said, the parental notification provision. No law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's health care provider. Now, a lot of these, none of these terms is defined.
Right.
And besides the actual law wording here of the amendment, there's also a ballot summary. But looking at the two, they're identical except for the very first part where the ballot summary says, oh, this means parental notification. So my question to you is this: is it normal? I mean, Florida has had a lot of ballot constitutional amendment ballot measures in the past. Isn't the ballot summary usually much more substantial and contains definitions of the terms? And if so, is it an anomaly that Amendment 4 leaves so many of these terms, really all of them, undefined?
Yeah, if you go to most voter initiatives where you put something on the ballot and it is done because of signature gathering by individuals, there's no debate, obviously. It's not like a legislative back and forth debate. There's no public hearings. It's basically whoever can get the number of signatures. And so when you put that on the ballot, you have to give a ballot summary first. That ballot summary can be up to 75 words. Most ballots use the full 75 words. This is half of the words, meaning it has almost no explanation at all. But then when you look at the actual language of the amendment, there's anywhere between 4 to 8 or 10 pages of definitions of the actual language. This one has nothing. So none of these terms are defined, and they're not defined intentionally so. So it says no law shall delay, penalize, restrict abortion up to viability. What's viability? Well, people have different views of viability. But let's assume that viability is somewhere along the 21st of the 24th week. Let's just assume that. Well, and that might be an assumption. Other people might say, well, no, it's actually all the way up to the 9th month. So there's no definition on it.
Right.
But then it says or, so you can't restrict or penalize or prohibit an abortion up to viability. Or, and that's a big or, unless it is for the health of the patient according to the healthcare provider. Well, health is not defined. Health is not defined because we know why they did that. Doe versus Bolton, as you know, with the companion decision of Roe versus Wade, used a modified World Health Organization definition of health, which means anything. Nausea, the fact that you just don't want a baby right now, you're pursuing your college or your other career, or you've had too many babies, or whatever it might be. That's any reason. Health includes any reason, and that's why they didn't define it. So for any reason, even after, quote, viability, whenever that is, you can have an abortion. Healthcare provider, what's that? Well, they could have actually referenced a specific section of the Florida statutes where a healthcare provider is a licensed medical doctor. But since they left the term undefined, the healthcare provider includes in Florida law 58 categories of healthcare practitioners, including a tattoo artist, including physical therapist, including a 911 emergency operator, including an orthotic shoe fitter and the assistant to the orthotic shoe fitter. Many of these people have zero medical training at all. That means there will be no requirement for doctors, licensed medical doctors, to participate in abortion. That means a clinic worker that has no medical training, even if you're in the 8th or 9th month, can say, oh, well, this abortion is necessary to protect the health because the patient just doesn't want it. And therefore, the abortion takes place all the way up to the 9th month.
You know, Matt, I just want to tease out one more thought in the limited time we have, and we're grateful for your time here. As you well know, we're not, lest people say, oh, well, no, this is just your opinion about what the implications of this amendment would be. We've got a long track record here in America as to both how the abortion lobby and how the courts have dealt with the interpretation of various abortion-related language, whether it's in statutes or court decisions. And I want to give two quick examples. Before the Dobbs case, as you know, the Supreme Court had the June Medical Services case coming out of Louisiana back in 2020. And in that decision, they invalidated the law that said, well, the abortionist should be someone who has admitting privileges in a nearby hospital. Seems to be a very reasonable requirement. But what they were saying was, and I have part of the decision here, the reasoning made me think about the implications of Amendment 4 and these other amendments, because they said those women not altogether prevented from obtaining an abortion would face other burdens. As Whole Women's Health it said, the reduction in abortion providers caused by Act 620 would inevitably mean longer waiting times and increased crowding. And then they talk about travel time, because, again, the argument being, well, you put this regulation on the clinic, some of them are going to have to close, at least temporarily. But what happens if they can't find someone who's qualified? And then we go back even further, the famous Gosnell case out of Philadelphia. You'll remember that the grand jury reported that under Governor Robert Casey, who was a pro-life governor, the Department of Health inspected the abortion facilities. But when pro-choice Governor Tom Ridge came in, and I'm reading from the grand jury report, the attorneys interpreted the same regulations that had permitted annual inspections for years to no longer authorize those inspections. And then a representative from the Department of Health said, during Governor Ridge's administration, that policy was motivated by a desire not to be, quote, putting up a barrier to women seeking abortions. And then we look at this language of Amendment 4 and these other 9 proposed amendments. And we see this kind of language. You're not going to delay. You can't delay the abortion. You can't burden the abortion. You can't restrict the abortion. And it's like they don't just want abortion to be legal. They want it to be completely unhindered and unfettered and delivered on a silver platter, at express speed. We've got a history here. The terrible Gosnell case, the striking down of very reasonable laws like they had in Louisiana. And isn't this evidence of how the wording, as you've already pointed out, which is so vague and undefined, in Amendment 4 is going to lead to, first of all, terrible unforeseen consequences affecting the safety of women. And then secondly, I think it's going to lead to endless litigation in the Florida courts, because if you leave these terms undefined and yet they're in the Constitution, isn't that going to mean that the courts are going to have to keep sorting this out with challenge after challenge in the years to come?
Yes, you're exactly right on point. The challenges, unfortunately, I think are going to be very difficult to overcome and defend against, because when you say no law shall restrict, well, every law restricts. That means nothing. So the only thing that stands is parental notification. Nothing else will be able to stand. They want abortion totally unregulated, which means abortion all the way up to and during birth with no restrictions. Anyone can do it, no requirement for medical training, and that the state should fund that abortion. And they don't even want health or safety standards. So this really will push women to the back alley butchers, because this will mean that people that have zero medical training will be able to do abortions, chemical and other surgical abortions, with no training and no health and safety laws or requirements. And women will die, and they'll be injured, they'll be killed, they'll be maimed. And when the state of Florida then says, we need to come in and stop this gross abuse by these abortion butchers, and they pass a law to regulate the health and safety standards, then they'll be challenged in the courts by the ACLU and Planned Parenthood. And they'll say, well, wait a minute, that's a law that restricts. You can't do that. So this, is the exact opposite of what these abortion proponents are saying. They're trying to say, well, this is for women's rights. No, you're throwing women into the back alley butcher shops, and the state of Florida, under no circumstances, will be able to come in and help them, no matter how much abuse takes place, because of this abortion amendment. That's how extreme it is, and that's the message that really needs to get out. That's the message that these abortionists and Planned Parenthood groups want to hide, and they want to deceive people to make it sound like, oh, this is just some legislative process. Let's just overrule this one little law here, and we'll move on, and we'll be happy ever after. No, this is disastrous.
Yeah. Matt, thanks so much for helping us both understand and articulate this message. Where can people find the resources online for Liberty Counsel?
They can go to lc.org, and for this particular amendment, Florida, lc.org/FL amendment, lc.org/FL amendment. And for all the different state amendments, lc.org/abortion amendments. Abortion amendments for all the states and FL amendment for Florida.
Matt, thanks for your time today, and I will be with you for the 35th anniversary gala. I look forward to that, and we really appreciate you being on the program and looking forward to seeing you soon.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alveda King, board member of Priest for Life. More money is being spent in America to kill babies in the womb than to save them. Together, we need to change that, and today I want to invite you to support our work at Priest for Life. Why ours rather than other groups? Because we have a unique team that helps lead in every arena of the fight against abortion, and we activate the churches where you find people who are most likely to get involved in that fight. To awaken a pastor about abortion is to awaken thousands of people he serves. We do not receive church funding or government grants. We rely on you for individual donations. We have a very high evaluation among charities and top security on our donation site, prolifegift.org. You can go there for a one-time gift or to become a monthly donor, or you can call us at 321-500-1000.
In various states this fall, measures will be on the ballot to increase the numbers of abortions, to make it easier to get an abortion and to have abortions performed later in the pregnancy. This is one of the procedures that would be made legal. The baby, as you can see, is dismembered step by step. Arms and legs torn off. Head eventually crushed. These are babies who could survive outside the womb. These are babies who feel pain. Do you think this procedure should be legal? If not, vote against the abortion amendments.